The most used Pokemon of all time for VGC by False Swipe Gaming.
Here is the VGC counterpart to our previous video, the most used Pokemon of all time for singles. Go check that out if you haven't already. These Pokemon have either stood the test of time and appeared in multiple years of VGC, or they were so centralizing to the year they debuted that they shaped the metagame in their own image. Let's get started.
Okay, we're going to see Landorus on this list. We're going to see Incineroar on this list. We're going to see Xerneas, maybe Yveltal, probably more niche. Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, some combination of them. I know I'm listing a bunch of Ubers right now, but they're very, very warping in how they affect VGC. Probably something like Whimsicott, Tornadus, Kingdra, maybe Politoed. Politoed's going to be good. Drizzle Politoed. These are some just calling out right out the gate. Let's see how many I get.
And while we
VGC
translate singles to doubles
format.
play, learn to translate languages because this video is sponsored by Mondly, who's offering 96% off for lifetime access.
Nice.
This top 5 language learning app is practically giving itself away at 96% off. And that's a steal because Mondly offers language lessons in over 1,320 language combinations.
Sounds pretty cool,
what do you mean by combinations, you might wonder? Is this Pokemon? Well, Mondly offers 41 foreign languages to learn from 33 native languages. So for me, my native tongue is obviously English, so I just inputted that and now I can quickly start several American English to Japanese courses. And Mondly is designed in a way to learn language speaking proficiently through daily use. To do so, it has daily lessons where I can build my proficiency in Japanese by taking 10-minute lessons every day. And the best part about it is that a lot of the content on here is practical and focused on conversations from very specific situations that you'd probably find yourself in. So for me, I selected travel as my primary reason for wanting to learn Japanese. And wouldn't you know it, there's travel-specific lessons for me. All of this and more when you download Mondly. So if you want to practically steal all of this content and also support the channel to help us produce more content, click the link in the description below to take advantage of Mondly's summer sale and get 96% off lifetime access to all languages. And thank you so much to Mondly for sponsoring this video.
I like that. That was a good ad read. 10 out of 10 ad read. It was short, to the point, very, very direct. Also, I mean, as a product for that seemingly they use, right? 96% off of lifetime access too for a language helper app. I mean, consider me interested. I think this was a very direct and concise ad read. I liked it. Very good.
All of the genies have had their moment in the sun, or more often, the rain. But the first one we'll visit is Tornadus. Along with his brother, these two basically charged rent to any other Pokemon foolish enough to try and step on their territory of the 2011 meta. Fitting its elemental predisposition, Tornadus' main job was to set up Tailwind with Prankster, then fire off a Flying Gem boosted acrobatics. Prankster also let it taunt opposing would-be Trick Room users, ensuring that its speed control was king on the field.
I am very well acquainted with Tornadus from Sword and Shield VGC because, good God, I use Whimsicott, Whimsicott being my literal favorite Pokemon, especially because of what it does. Prankster, Tailwind, Whimsicott with Taunt. Tornadus is the only thing, especially Tornadus Therian, that really combats that. So I've become very well acquainted with Tornadus in VGC.
11 had a very limited selection of Pokemon to choose from. Only Unovomons, in fact. So Tornadus could also just kind of outstat all of its competitors. Add in the fact that the meta was chock full of strong fighting types, and you had a recipe for success. Even with acrobatics as its only viable flying attack. Tornadus and Thundurus were in fact so often used that a few players developed a strategy designed around exploiting their presence. Rivalry Haxorus, which took advantage of the fact that genies were locked to the male gender for a free power boost. Tornadus landed on 6 of 2011's top 18, a presence only rivaled by one other mon. Thundurus may not have offered Tailwind, but it brought a potentially even more diabolical form of speed control in the dreaded Prankster Thunderwave. It had the same fighting resistance as Tornadus, matched up well into its fellow Genie, and one of the best special attack stats in the format, which it could use way better than Tornadus thanks to its reliable Thunderbolts. Thundurus was the de facto Pokemon in the format, present on almost every single serious team for its mix of disruption and power, which was among the best when fully dialed into special attack. And now Now it's time to talk about Ray Rizzo. We talk about Ray Rizzo's groundbreaking, bulky Thundurus a lot on this channel. He deserves it. Ray took the entire competitive scene by surprise with his bold Thundurus packing a Chardy Berry for extra survivability measures that let it stick around longer than anyone expected. You know what?
Wow, he played the slow game on that one. He played defensively. Ooh, that's spicy.
What's better than one super strong Thunderbolt, two very strong Thunderbolts, or a Thunderbolt and a Thunderwave, or a Hidden Power Flying thrown in for the mix? In this case, it's important to talk about Ray's Thundurus because it set the tone for Thundurus in years after. Tornadus may have fallen off after 2011, but Thundurus continued to be one of the best Pokemon in VGC for years after.
Yeah,
even once it started to get outmatched offensively, it was hard to turn down the sheer disruptive power Thundurus could generate all on its own. As our dear friend Aaron Cybertron Zhang knows so well, Thundurus may never have reached the near 80% usage it had in its 2011 heydays, but it's got the most World's Top 8 appearances ever at 24. If that doesn't qualify it for the highest usage, I don't know what does. Cresselia is the grand matron of VGC, a Pokemon with a history so lengthy you'd need the second screen of the DS to read it. It top 8'd Worlds for the first time in 2010 when Ray Rizzo won the championship with it. Then it showed up at Worlds top 8 last year too. 13 years spanned longer than any Pokemon in the game's history. In between, it's been a stalwart pick as the premier full-on support Trick Room setter. Cresselia's massive bulk and utility move pool make it one of the most reliable Pokemon to ever grace VGC. It can set Trick Room, deal out decent damage and coverage with Psychic or Ice Beam. It can bolster its partner with Helping Hand, and as of last year, heal its allies with Lunar Blessing. Cresselia is the ultimate support mon, an ally any Pokemon or player would be happy to have on their side. Cresselia has peaked at over 50% usage multiple times throughout the years. In 2012, 6 of the top 8 World's Top Cut teams had a Cresselia, and funnily enough, most of them didn't have Trick Room. And while Ray Rizzo took home the gold with Trick Room and Swagger, ever the innovator that guy, most players use Cresselia for its bulk and access to Icy Wind, an alternative form of speed control that didn't necessitate using slow mons and countered the dragon heavy metagame very well.
It has Levitate too, actually, so pairing that with Chomp makes a lot of sense if it does have Levitate, because you Icy Wind it, right? And that slows both opposing Pokemon speeds. That Garchomp is about to wreck Earthquake all over that Heatran. Sure, it's probably going to miss the opposing Cresselia, but that Cresselia is also a speed down from the Icy Wind. I like this. I always like the Earthquake, Levitate / flying strats in VGC. They're very, I mean, those have been around since Gen 3, right? The advent of double battles, but honestly, they're really cool. It's old reliable, so to speak. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Cresselia was the most used Pokemon at Worlds the following year too, with 53% presence across the board. And finally, it was the first letter of Chalk in 2015. The tanky speed control setter that enabled that composition's dual modes. Many Pokemon have come and gone in VGC history, but Cresselia stands tall for over a decade, untroubled by the shifts of time.
There is always a team that will run Cresselia in VGC.
Xerneas. To showcase the stranglehold this mon had on the VGC scene's collective mind, I'll present this tweet. One of the most reviled Pokemon of all time due to its frustratingly simple and hard to stop game plan. Xerneas was public enemy #1 during the 2018 season. Of course, that
it really is. It really is that simple. How do you play Xerneas? Power of Geomancy. What else? I mean, just Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, whatever other moves, just win. Oh, there's got to be some trick to it. No, Xerneas is straight value. Do not underestimate the Xerneas. Xerneas will actually just run straight through your team.
Didn't stop everyone from slapping it on their team, clicking Power Herb Geomancy, and blowing through the competition. Even with just 2 attacking fairy moves, Xerneas was still a major threat, especially when paired with support Pokemon that could facilitate it. Let's see, what was Xerneas looking for? Fake out pressure to let it click Geomancy, Intimidate to shore up its weaker physical defenses, and something that can pressure steel types. Any ideas? The Xerneas and Incineroar duel was perhaps only matched in synergy strategy by how frustrating they were to play against. You had to guarantee that you had a game plan ready to deal with them, lest boosted Xerneas run over your team. Xerneas enjoyed a 60% or higher usage rate in all 3 of the first international tournaments of the year up until the North American Internationals, at which point everyone said screw this deer and pivoted to Groudon instead, leaving Xerneas at a paltry 3rd place in usage. Oh no, how will it ever survive? Quite well, it turns out. The Xerneas infestation crept back up to near 50% at Worlds, and Xerneas assured that it would haunt the dreams of VGC players ever after.
If Xerneas is in the format, you have to account that it's there. It's much like all these Pokemon can be said the same thing, right? And this kind of mirrors certain sentiment from, say, Yu-Gi-Oh deck building, especially in the OCG, where Max C, a very controversial card actually, is still legal. Because Max C, because of what it does, is legal in the format, regardless of if you're building with it or not building with Max C, you have to deck build with the understanding that Max C is a thing in the format. I don't think it's that warping personally, but if Xerneas is in the format, you have to have an out for a Xerneas. It's like if Kyogre's in the format, if you have Landorus in the format, say Dynamax format, right, Gen 8, you have to have your outs to it. How do you win against this matchup? How do you win against Shadow Rider Calyrex? You don't? Well, you might want to rethink your team comp. You might want to rethink what you're doing or have something to combat that, because you have to take into account that it exists in the metagame.
A Pokemon so broken that Game Freak had to immediately nerf its ability to the next generation. Mega Kangaskhan was the Pokemon to beat in Gen 6 VGC. This isn't a complex Pokemon. It Mega Evolves, fakes you out for like 30% of your health, and then hits you hard again for probably 300% of your health with Return, with a few power-up or sucker punches thrown in depending on the circumstance. Despite its simplicity, entire metagames lived and died around the counters to Kangaskhan, and the counters to Kangaskhan, and so on and so forth. It's how you end up with the world's top 8 like 2014's, which had no Kangaskhan, despite it being the terror of the season all year long. It's also how you end up with the world's top 8s like 2015, and everyone knows this top 8, the rise of Chalk, where all of the teams looked the same and 6 of them had Mega Kangaskhan. It's actually a bit of a misleading image. Only 41% of the players used Mega Kangaskhan in that tournament, making it comfortably the most used Mega Pokemon, but still only 3rd in usage. This is the thing with Mega Kang. Everyone knows it's broken. You know it, your opponent knows it, your friend who doesn't know Pikachu from Pachirisu knows it. So there's a ton of strategies to counter it. Over 2015 span, multiple tournaments saw huge Kangaskhan usage, only for everyone to focus on beating it the next week. And you've got to wonder, if the Pokemon weren't so simple, even boring, is there a chance it might have been used more? Thankfully, it doesn't seem like we'll have an answer to that question for a while.
Yeah. Well, and we had like, what was it? Was it a double nerf? Because I know going into Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, I know Parental Bond got nerfed, and I thought it got nerfed again after Oraz going into Gen 7. Gen 7 also nerfed a couple things, like Dark no longer resists, Steel no longer resists Dark, I think, something like that. Like, it's just neutral now. Gen 7 had a lot of changes that it brought along. But, yeah, Kangaskhan is actually a threat, especially in X and Y, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire 2, even with the nerf. Parental Bond is just like you get a second hit immediately after at like 50% the power. So your power-up punch becomes a Swords Dance with 2 hits, right? First hit, power-up punch, hit, attack increase, tiny one, hit, attack increase, right? So now you're +2 for your next attack. You also don't really ever think about the normal type and how defensive it can be until you're fighting something like Mega Kangaskhan, until you're fighting something like, Oranguru, depending on what team you're fighting, right? Normal typing, Indeedee as well. Normal typing actually goes pretty... Is it? No. Is it normal typing? I forget Indeedee's typing. I thought it was Psychic Normal. Someone's going to have to check me on that, though. Normal typing can be oddly defensive because Ghost doesn't hit it. And Ghost is a lot of value, whether you're running things like Dragapult, whether you're running things like Aegislash, right? Shadow Ball is very easy to click, very easy to spam. Normal typing has a really interesting way in which it can disrupt some plays.
Chances are when you think of VGC, there's a different furry fire type intimidator that leaps to mind. But before the Wrestle Cat became more intimidating and took its seat on VGC's throne, Arcanine was the top dog, and one of the most powerful examples of how a limited metagame can drastically skew usage. 2017's Alola-only format meant Arcanine was one of the only viable intimidators allowed, with the primary others being Gyarados and Salamence. While both of those are good mons in their own right, Gyarados had a rough go of it in 2017's Coco Coco overrun waters, and Salamence came with its own weaknesses to common mons such as Ninetales and the other Tapus. Arcanine, by contrast, sported a Fairy Resistance, an excellent support move pool, including Snarl and Will-O-Wisp.
No, I remember this format. People were teching like Fire Fang and stuff on Alolan Muck because Kartana was just so omnipresent. Kartana was a threat in this format. I actually missed this format. I thought that this was where VGC was going to go because having your Alola Dex, so to speak, your Alola Dex had not only Alolan form Pokemon, but Pokemon from all regions, right? Like it was a Alola Dex, but then you had the expanded National Dex, which later on it's like, yeah, we'll allow the National Dex into that. I thought that going into Gen 8 and beyond, that was going to be the standard, which I was really disappointed when they just said, yeah, we're not bringing all of them over, and we'll just have select Pokemon and selective games. I thought that VGC formats were done right with Sun and Moon because you had that Alola Dex for your competitive play, such as we're going to not have Garchomp in the Alola Dex, or we're going to have this in the Dex. Well, we don't want that in the Dex, but you can have this as well, right? So you got to pick and choose what you had, but you were also still able to bring things in, like your Rayquaza from Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Cresselia from, Diamond Pearl Platinum, etc., etc. And I don't know, I think a lot of people really gave Sun and Moon, and by extension as well, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, like a bad rep. Honestly, they're not bad games, though, especially, considering some of the issues that I myself personally will experience in Scarlet and Violet, and just some of the frame rates, even in battle, just really makes my head hurt, and I really do miss more of that consistent, seamless experience.
Reliable recovery via Morning Sun to keep cycling intimidates. Pair that with good matchups into Kartana, Ninetales, and Celesteela, and you've got one of the best Pokemon in the format.
Yeah.
The usage stats back that up. Later in the format, Arcanine became a near mandatory inclusion on many builds of teams, reaching staggering usage stats at the highest level of competition. Arcanine was on over 70% of top cut teams at all of North American, Latin American, and Oceania Internationals. It was rare to see a matchup on stream that didn't feature it. Come Worlds, its usage dipped to 44 out of 81 Day 2 teams, a meager 54%. But who are we kidding? That's still nuts.
Still
that
54%.
Said, it was a different niche intimidator who won the top prize. Ryota Otsubo's Crocodile, the lone croc in Day 2. Outside of 2017, Arcanine often struggles for competition with Incineroar and Landorus T, but on the rare occasion, those mons aren't in the format, such as the early Sword and Shield meta. Well, every dog has its day.
Yeah. I mean, Arcanine's never a bad option. It will get power
The only Pokemon
out.
to eclipse Arcanine's usage in 2017 was Tapu Koko. And if you remember the Arcanine usage stats, you know how nuts that is. Tapu Koko is a classic case of right time, right place. The Alola Dex is severely limited when it comes to fast-paced special attackers. Tapu Koko is the second fastest Pokemon.
The Alolan Dex was very slow. If you look at things like Decidueye, Primarina, Incineroar, the Alolan Dex was very, very slow in comparison. It was almost like a power down for speed. So Tapu Koko, and even then, wow, I can't remember your name right now. I know the Roach's name, but I totally am spacing it at this exact moment, and that's really cringe. But yeah, it's one of those things like Koko really had a good niche here, and it was one of the speedier Pokemon in the metagame.
Pokemon in the format, has a great offensive typing, and can make up for its mediocre special attack via the benefit of electric terrain or its item, such as Electrium Z or Life Orb. Tapu Koko was a fast, hard-hitting missile in a format that didn't have many of those Pokemon to go around. While Tapu Koko's coverage is painfully limited, it also worked out nicely for the format. The main ground types of 2017 were Garchomp and Crocodile, two Pokemon that conveniently could be knocked out by a well-placed Dazzling Gleam. Tapu Koko might be frail, but its offensive presence was hard to ignore, especially with a Z Crystal placed in the mix. It was the most used Pokemon all format long, reaching a 75% presence at the North American Internationals and holding strong at 56% come Worlds. Every team except for one in the World's top 8 featured Tapu Koko, making it one of only 6 Pokemon to ever be 7 out of the 8 World's top cut teams. Tapu Koko continues to be a strong presence throughout Gen 7 VGC, with 50% presence on the top cut teams in both subsequent years and another championship in 2018. But in recent years, it's fallen off in the wake of limited availability and other fast electric types, such as Regieleki.
I like the photos now.
Here, we'll let an image from the official Pokemon stream do the talking for us.
Yeah. Look, as somebody who loves Fluttermane, Fluttermane's a problem.
Listen, if this thing hadn't been snapped out of singles faster than anyone could realize it wasn't a mischievous evolution, it probably would have had this usage rate there too. It's not hard to understand why Flutter Mane is so good. It's got stats like a 12-year-old designed super mischievous, an insane typing both offensively and defensively, and an ability that lets it basically get a free stat boost of its choosing. For VGC purposes, it's even got a stab spread move that just so happens to hit some of the best Pokemon in the game super effectively. While it's not currently at the same peaks as it experienced in 2023, Flutter Mane has consistently been the most used Pokemon in the game over multiple formats. Every new rule set introduces a new contender. Urshifu, Raging Bolt, Ogerpon, whatever. They all pale before Flutter. Flutter Mane's staying power comes from its seemingly endless customizability, thanks in large part to the pick-a-boost ability of photosynthesis. You might think that open team sheets would make it hard to surprise your opponents, but players have developed incredibly detailed EV spreads and builds for this Pokemon that are still evolving at this moment. Over Scarlet and Violet's lifespan, we've seen fast offensive Flutter, bulky Flutter, Choice Specs Flutter, Icy Wind Flutter, even Sash Perish Song Flutter, courtesy of Wolf Glick. Look, we talk about Wolf.
Yeah, you know, Wolf Glick's always bringing some interesting stuff to tournaments. Like he brought Alolan Executor to a big VGC tournament back in Gen 7. Dude just is built different.
A lot on this channel, but he's a really useful case study here. Wolf used Perish Trap Flutter, at the time an extremely rare variant, to win the Orlando Regionals in 2023. At that point, the biggest VGC tournament of all time. In January this year, he showed up to the new biggest tournament of all time, Charlotte Regionals, and used a different uncommon Flutter Mane move, Calm Mind, to win that tournament too. Then last month, 1 year after that Orlando win, he won Orlando again, this time with using stock standard Flutter Mane. The point is, over a whole year and 3 different tournament wins, Wolf was still finding new ways to use Flutter Mane to surprise his opponents. That's a testament to the potential of this mon as a whole. With single restricted formats on the way in and Calyrex Shadow Rider looming, Flutter Mane may find itself relegated to the bench for the first time in Gen 9, but it's indisputably the best and most used Pokemon of the generation.
Yeah. No, Flutter Mane is great. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I love Flutter Mane. It instantly shot up to like my top 3 favorite Pokemon as soon as I saw it. Yes, it's strong, but I also love its design, especially being a fairy ghost type. It's so cool. I really love it. Damn, is it strong though.
Groudon and Kyogre are an interesting pair to include in this video. To be honest, neither of them have reached the absurd usage stats we see on some other VGC Pokemon.
But
that's not to say they haven't reached
staples.
pretty high highs. Both of them have been at 50 to 60% usage before in top level competitions, but you're probably never going to see the 70 or 80% usage that other VGC stalwarts might have. That's because they're only permitted in formats along with other super powerful restricted legendaries, and those legendaries are strong in their own rights. Hell, in the current format, Groudon and Kyogre aren't even top tier picks, but it would be wrong not to mention them. Even if they've never totally centralized the metagame, they're indisputably 2 of the most impactful Pokemon to ever hit VGC. Even when they're not the inarguably best Pokemon of the format, the meta can't help being defined by their presence, whether it's in 2010, 2016, or 2020. 2016's addition of primal forms and powerful spread moves kept them as potent threats even amidst legendary power creep, and they were strong contenders in the Dynamax years, whether using the mechanic themselves or staying regular sized. Here's what it comes down to. Imagine yourself building for a restricted VGC format. Ask yourself, am I thinking about the weather? Well, if you're not, start thinking about the forecast now. Otherwise, these two are going to guarantee you have a very bad time.
Yes, absolutely. He is absolutely correct here. You have to consider that Kyogre and Groudon, and by extension Rayquaza as well, because you have Airlock, right? You have to consider that they exist. In fact, we had Drizzle from Kyogre get put on Pelipper in Gen 7, and Drought from Groudon put on Torkoal as well. And they see usage as well. Setting the weather can absolutely make or break certain teams, right? If your team is coming at you with a mono water team, right? And you come in, you drop a Groudon, and suddenly they're hitting you with a, they can't hit their, it's not Whirlwind, Hurricanes. They can't hit you with 100% Hurricanes anymore. They can't hit you with 100% Thunders anymore, especially coming in with the Groudon. Suddenly you have an immunity to Thunder if they're targeting Groudon because he's a ground type, right? And on top of that, now their water moves are doing 50% less damage because of the sun. Weather wars are absolutely a thing, and whether you're running it or not, you have to consider how you will out it. How do you out a Choice Specs Kyogre that's using Choice Band Water Spout? How do you take out a Groudon with what is it? Is it wide lens increases accuracy with like a wide lens precipice blades or something like that? How do you deal with them? How do you deal with the weather that follows in the wake of them? These are things you have to consider when it comes to VGC, and Groudon and Kyogre are legal in a format. Absolutely.
The king of singles is the viceroy of VGC, one of the single greatest Pokemon to ever hit the competitive field and the true genie of the healthy meta. Landorus does roll compression like no one else. In addition to the ever-useful Intimidate, it's a fearsome attacker with two of the best spread moves in VGC history, a pivot, and a potential candidate for fighting or dark coverage via super.
That face. Oh my god. Yeah, this is me when I fight the Landorus. 100%. Oh god, give me a second. This is what it's like to fight Landorus on ladder. Yeah.
Power and knockoff. This mon can be whatever you want it to be whenever you need it. Give it a Choice Scarf, a Life Orb, a Yacht Berry, an Assault Vest, a Rocky Helmet, whatever. Chances are Landorus will find a way to make it work. Its one consistent shortcoming, a lack of reliable flying moves, has been repeatedly repaired by the generational mechanics. In Sun and Moon, it used Z Crystals well. In Sword and Shield, it becomes a fearsome Dynamax setup attacker. And last year, it proved itself a formidable Terra user, with Terra Blast slotting in nicely for flying coverage. In addition to its longevity, Landorus has put up peak usage stats that are only rivaled by a few select Pokemon. Its absolute height was in 2015, where it was a crucial mon for basically every team because of its great matchups into, well, every single Mega Pokemon in the format. Wow, Kang, and the other physical attackers hated its Intimidate. Charizard loathed Rock Slides. Landorus was almost always on over half of teams, and at US Nationals, it put up a jaw-dropping 73% usage stats. But the best is yet to come. At Worlds, Landorus became the only Pokemon in VGC history to have a place on every single team in the top 8, a feat only matched by Urshifu last year on a technicality because of its dual forms. The real kicker, those 8 Landorus held 5 different items, a testament to this Pokemon's overwhelming versatility. Landorus reached similar levels of usage in 2018, its next foray in a non-restricted format, but it also was starting to face competition from a new upstart Intimidator. Who could that be?
No, absolutely. Landorus versatile definitely is the word that comes to mind. You can run it with AV, Rocky Helmet, Life Orb, Choice Specs, Choice Scarf. You can run physical, you can run special, you can run bulky, you can run full offensive. I mean, the sky's the limit, no pun intended, when it comes to Landorus, right? Being ground flying. It's strictly value when you're running Landorus. In fact, I default to it personally for a lot of my VGC teams when I make teams. It's just a good, safe, consistent, strong option.
You know him, you love him, you hate him, you love to hate him. The single greatest VGC Pokemon of all time is here, and he's got the usage stats to prove it. Incineroar has been the most used Pokemon in VGC in every single format he's been available. Well, at least since he got bulked up a bit back in 2018 and got a bit more intimidating. Incineroar can fit in every team composition. There have been many times where if you're not running him, you're probably making the game harder for yourself. Chances are you know what Incineroar does already, but if somehow you've managed to escape his omnipresence, we'll review. In addition to great natural bulk, Intimidate, and an amazing defensive typing, Incineroar has a support move pool to die for, with access to Fake Out, Parting Shot, U-Turn, Knockoff, Snarl, Taunt, Roar, Will-O-Wisp, Quash. I mean, I'm getting off track here, but it's absurd how many moves they've given to this stupid cat. He's even got Throat Chop to shut down opposing parting shots and other moves from the opponent. Oh, and then he's got a base 110 attack on top of all of that, so his Flare Blitzes actually do damage. I called Xerneas the most reviled VGC Pokemon of all time earlier. Well, that's just because everyone is numb to the cat at this point. At a certain point, it's like going through exposure therapy. You've just been around it so much it no longer affects you. Incineroar has pretty much been at least at 50% usage since 2018. But his peaks are higher than almost any other competitor. In 2019, Incineroar had an over 80% usage in the top cuts of the EUIC, OCIC, and LAIC. And he was at 65% at the NAIC. At Worlds, he posted 83% usage, the highest stat ever recorded at a World Championship, and one that's not likely to be toppled anytime soon.
At what point do you look at from the VGC standpoint? At what point do you make like an emergency ban list and say you cannot run this in the format? 60%, 50%, 70%, 87% of teams? And I mean, obviously that's going to be one of those where like, well, it's their Pokemon, they want to use it, right? I mean, they've also showcased the like, look, we're only allowing certain Pokemon in this game, right? And that's completely fine, but by that same logic, right? when you have a usage rate of like 87%, imagine you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And 80% of people are running something like Teledad or Dragon Rulers, right? Which I think in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's like if a metagame is over 60% of a specific deck, you have like a tier 0 format. 87% of teams in the competitive space here using Incineroar. What point do you just like drop the ban hammer? Hey, you can still use Incineroar in casual play, obviously, but you can't use it in VGC, or we're making sure it's not, legal for VGC. Because I know that the engines can support it. Going back into a non-mega format in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, there was a couple formats where there wasn't megas allowed. And if you gave like Scissorite, you could hit the Mega Evolve button, but it just wouldn't actually Mega Evolve you. So you had, the ability to do it. You could click the things, but it wouldn't allow you to. Or the team checks like, hey, you can't use this Pokemon. That's very interesting to consider because I've never really heard people talk about a ban list, and I wonder how that would actually affect VGC. And obviously you have things like Smogon where things are banned from different tiers and stuff like that. But in a format within a Pokemon with 87% usage, that's insane to me. That's like saying like, all Yu-Gi-Oh decks run, all Yu-Gi-Oh decks would run Monster Reborn. No, they don't. There are decks that just cut Monster Reborn. You don't need it. It's a good extender, but it has a different use case than it did years and years and years ago. The game has changed. I mean, something like Pot of Prosperity, which is objectively worse Pot of Greed. I mean, a lot of decks will run it. I don't think it's 60% of decks at a tournament. I could be wrong on that. I'd be interested for statistics of that. But like, that is a problem. That is a partially stagnant metagame at that point where you have 87% of teams that are using it. That is insane value. And I mean, I get it. Sometimes they want to tweak things. Like, I get it. It's why Mimikyu got its disguise nerf going into Gen 8, so you can no longer disguise into Focus Sash. I understand it. It makes me sad when things get nerfed, and I'm not advocating for Incineroar to get nerfed. However, when you have such a overwhelming usage statistic, what is your response to that? How do you deal with that? And I think that's what Pokemon has to ask itself at this point. If we're going to have this in the game, how do we deal with this? Are we going to issue a ban list? Are we going to say that it's restricted? I mean, they could even make it a Pokemon League thing where the Pokemon League has decided that Incineroar is no longer allowed for usage, right? The Pokemon League, quote unquote, itself has ruled Incineroar is no longer eligible for this. It's why you can have things like, Gardevoir that can create literal black holes, Garchomp, which flies faster than, jet planes, right? Was it Mach 2, something like that? And you rationalize, the Pokemon League says Earthquake has this much. The Pokemon League now dictates that Steel typing no longer resists Dark typing. It's only neutral now. And when I started to kind of think in that manner, a lot of it made a lot more sense in terms of justification and stuff like that as generations progress. With this omniscient Pokemon League kind of entity kind of doing this, it's at least a neat little headcanon.
Makes this even more staggering is that it wasn't a fluke. 2019 may have been his peak, but Incineroar put up almost the same numbers in 2022, where he stuck at a 70% usage or higher for every single international tournament, including Worlds.
Wow.
Players got a reprieve last year when he wasn't allowed in the format, but the good old cat is back with a vengeance for 2024, and from his current stats, it's as if he never left. Usage stats don't always tell the full story, but in this case, they do. Incineroar has the highest consistent usage of any Pokemon ever. Numbers that only fit the greatest VGC Pokemon ever made. And yet he's still not the highest usage VGC Pokemon of all time. Not in peaks, at least. There's one other Pokemon that's actually managed to just sneak past VGC's undisputed king, even if only for a brief moment.
Gen 1 Mewtwo?
Generation 8's competitive VGC history was ruled by Pokemon who could best exploit the Dynamax mechanic. Think of Charizard launching off G-Max Wildfires, Zacian cutting down opposing Max Mons with Behemoth Blades, Regieleki and Thundurus, and a host of other superpowered legendary Pokemon came to define Sword and Shield's history. But when the games first dropped, one unassuming Pokemon took over the meta harder than any of them would.
Yeah, actually. I was about to start kicking myself because I don't remember this. No, Togekiss. Yeah. Oh, wow, it has been that long, hasn't it? I played early Gen 8 too. Togekiss was a big player. Oh, wow. I've blocked this out of my memory.
Togekiss. That's right, this is the Pokemon that had the most dominant usage stats we've ever seen in VGC.
It's
Togekiss
good.
brought something very rare to the table, redirection combined with the offensive presence. The Pokemon's most famous redirection mons, Clefairy, Amogus, and yes, even the notorious Pachirisu,
Amogus?
rarely bring offense to the table, but Togekiss was different. In addition to redirecting one of your precious 3 turns of max moves, Togekiss could fire off a big max airstreams of its own to buff its team, or it could launch spread dazzling gleams with a 50% chance of critting due to Scope Lens in conjunction with its ability Super
Wild
Luck, cutting
egg.
through any defensive boost you might have amassed from your max moves. Or it could flinch you with Air Slash, or it could yawn you, or it could helping hand its partner. Note that I say could. That's because one of Togekiss's biggest strengths was its unpredictability. At the Dallas region,
Togekiss is also an example of incredible versatility, not only from a stat block perspective, but a move perspective, especially when you have Serene Grace and you're trying to fish for, what is it, Air Slash crits. Good God, Togekiss is easily one of my top 10 favorite Pokemon. Like, just I love it. It's just flying egg. It's super cute. I love it. But man, is it versatile.
one of the first Pokemon tournaments of the generation, Togekiss was at an impressive 67% usage rate within the top 32.
Wow.
But the real interesting part comes from the top 8. 4 of the top 8 players used Togekiss. All of them were different. Justin Kruba ran Razor Claw with Flamethrower, Air Slash, Dazzling Gleam, and Follow Me. Justin Burns switched out Flamethrower for Heat Wave. Runner-up Bingji
Makes
Wang
sense, yeah.
opted
Burn
for
chance.
Helping Hand over a Fire move, and Champion Aaron Trailer went full support, dropping Air Slash for Yawn and the Razor Claw for Babiri Berry. Remember, this is before open team sheets, so the Togekiss on the other side of the screen is a mystery to you. Togekiss was versatile, potent in supportive and offensive roles, and it could even do both at the same time thanks to the undisputed best move of Gen 8, Max Airstream. It's not an exaggeration to say that Togekiss was one of the most dominant Pokemon of all time. At the Oceania Internationals, an absolutely staggering 29 of the top 32 teams had a Togekiss, including 7 of the top 8 teams. That's 90% usage in the top 32, the highest stats ever for an international tournament. If you go to the top 64, it's only 73%, yeah, and the Pacific Ocean is only a little deep. Okay, so technically if we measure by top 64 usage, Incineroar's got slightly higher numbers prior, but why do we have to measure it by top 64 instead of top 32? This is my channel and I can make whatever arbitrary cutoff I want. So
That's
forget
fair.
Landorus, forget Incineroar. Today I'm telling you my truth, which is that the Pokemon with the highest peak VGC usage of all time is no intimidating U-turning pivot. It's Togekiss.
Yeah.
And that's that on that.
Yeah, I mean, objectively, though, in a top 32 situation,
And that's it.
Togekiss
This has
objectively
been the
has it.
most used Pokemon of all time in VGC. Let us know in the comments if you think we should have mentioned some other Pokemon that had impressive usage statistics. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.
I mean, to be fair, right? That's one of those things that, like, oh my god, I totally lost it. I had something totally for the ready, and I totally just blew it. Oh my god. Oh, it's been a day.
And thank you so much to our platinum tier patrons. Thank you so much to Raven Daytona Ring, Sorazon Croxon, Stoneface Colin, Bingleton, Ray Ray, Daniel Isbeast, Glitcherton, Alex Sabo, Funky, Skylaria, and Chica Chihyo for their support of our videos.
Yeah. No, that's impressive. Like, well, right, I was talking about, I like that he covers not only, like, top 16. Certain games, certain formats and stuff only cover top 16. They'll just, like, top 16, top 8, top 4, right, top cut, right? They don't even go to top 32. I like that he covers top 32. Top 64, you start getting some skewed numbers. I think top 32 is going to give you an incredibly accurate, incredibly defined image of what you're looking at in a given format or tournament. That's just me personally, though. I think 32 is a completely fine cutoff. I can't see an argument for 64, but I mean, you are broadening the scope at that point. 32, I think, is completely fine. If you have not checked out False Swipe Gaming, do yourself a favor. Link is down below in the description to not only this video link, but the channel link as well. Go ahead and do yourself a favor. Check out False Swipe Gaming. I had one of the, I believe it was an editor for False Swipe Gaming, comment in one of the videos I had done. And it was just super cool to interact. Like, they really seem like they're such a cool team over there, and they have a lot of fun in what they do. And I react to a lot of what they do because, right, like, most used Pokemon of all time for VGC or for singles, or, right, the more Pokemon we never thought would fall off. They come out with a lot of really cool content, as well as a how great, how bad was X in the game competitively, right? And not a lot of people do that, and it's super cool to see. And so I want to, really share somebody that I think is doing amazing work. And even if you have no idea about Pokemon, you can start watching their content and kind of ease your way into maybe competitive Pokemon or why certain Pokemon are better than other Pokemon. And via osmosis, watching the content, be able to really gain that understanding. So if you haven't, definitely go ahead and check out False Swipe Gaming. They also have Smash Bros. Content over on their channel as well. I don't remember how prevalent it is, but there is Smash Bros. Content if that is your fancy. And thank you everyone for watching. I definitely do appreciate it. I hope that you're all having a good day, and I'll see you all in the next one.